We've invited her money financial coach, Rachel Bronstein, to join us tonight to talk about getting on track for our retirement. Rachel is a passionate advocate for financial empowerment and works to inspire individuals to gain confidence in managing their finances. Over the past 2 years, she has either directly coached or overseen programming for more than 400 individuals, guiding them towards financial success. She's also played a pivotal role in developing and growing her money's 8-week budgeting program called Finance Fix, which I think you might hear a little bit more about this evening. So let's get started and welcome Rachel.
Thank you so much, Linda. And to tell you a little bit about me, before I got started coaching, I used to think of retirement as that thing that I needed to do, but never really knew if I was doing it correctly, saving enough. I felt like I wasn't, and I didn't know how much I would need. At one point, I had heard that we would need about $1 million in retirement, but my husband always threw out numbers that were much bigger than that. I had always thought I was pretty financially savvy as well. I had a finance degree and my mom was a financial planner. I had watched her raise me and my special needs sister and take care of my sick dad. So I felt like I had learned the value of a dollar from a young age. So why did it feel so hard to grasp what is needed in retirement? Well, to take it back a little bit, in the last 2 to 3 decades in this country, we have become more responsible for our finances than any prior generation. Our parents and our grandparents had pensions provided by corporations and managed by pros. We have retirement plans and IRAs that we have to fund and manage ourselves. Our parents and grandparents had health insurance that came free with the job. We are asked to contribute more for our coverage in the form of higher copays and prescription costs every year. And while earlier generations had confidence that Social Security and Medicare would not only protect them, but their kids and grandkids as well, many of us, maybe even most of us, do not. But the good news is it doesn't have to be so hard to understand. We just need to walk through the process to get clarity. So having some money rules can help. Rules, whether they're traffic rules, stock trading rules, not only save us from chaos, they actually make our lives easier. And having too many choices, and that's essentially what a life without rules is both time-consuming and emotionally fraught. Having lines to color is simpler and easier, and rules provide us with a filter. A means at looking at most money decisions we're asked to make, and honestly, most of life decisions, and enabling us to say yes, or more importantly, to say no. So there's actually few things separating the people who will have a successful retirement from those that won't. And the folks who succeed in having that worry-free path do a few fundamental things. And they do them over and over again. They wash, rinse, and repeat. So Jean's compiled some money rules over her years in personal finance, and they are the mantras that she holds on to when she's going through a difficult time, because she knows they'll help right her own ship. So today we're going to focus on those money rules, and we're going to kick it off with money rule number 1. Personal finance is more personal than it is finance. That's for sure. When it comes to money, you have to make decisions that are right for you, not right for your friends or colleagues or even your mother, right for you and your family. That may mean leaving a little bit more cash in the bank because it enables you to sleep at night, while the experts are telling you to invest that money so it can grow. It may mean renting rather than buying because you think you're going to want to move in a few years, or it may mean deciding that you're going to work a few extra years because you can't stand the thought of leaving your kids with student loan debt. Whatever your personal choices, make them thoughtfully and with a plan to get you from here to there. That's key because along the way, there'll be starts and stops, there'll be emergencies and surprises, and there will be people sometimes who you care about who think you're doing it all wrong. That's because of money rule number 2. A person's behavior around money is emotional, sometimes nonsensical, often frustrating and maddening. The fact is that just like love, drugs, and alcohol, money can make us do crazy, stupid things. I personally have a cousin that every time I tell her that I'm not doing something, she says, YOLO, you only live once. Okay, well, we have to live and save for our future. So it's a bit of a balancing act. And the more money that's on the line, the more logic and reasoning fly out the window. And that's because money isn't just a tool that we use to get things in life. Money is loaded with all sorts of messaging. Some people, it means power, others, security, others, love. And for many, it's a combination of all of those things. So the result is that we treat it different than any other commodity. So if we were to take a resource like water or champagne, and I say, I'm going to divvy it up among everyone here, there would be a feeling that we should split it fairly. But if I say I have some extra money, now there's more infighting involved. People consider who's more or less worthy, who's more or less needy. It becomes a value judgment. There's morality associated with it. And therefore, it's more complicated. Much of this we know thanks to the work being done in the relatively new fields of behavioral finance and neuroeconomics. From this research, we understand that where money is concerned, human beings do two things over and over again. We adapt and we compare. We adapt to how much we have. In other words, we get used to it, and we compare ourselves to others. How much you have isn't as important as your colleague or the family next door. And chances are that if we make an irrational decision about money, one or both of these processes is in play. And we overcome this irrationality with money rule number 14. 61% of Americans were more afraid of outliving their money than they were of dying. Outliving your money is unfortunately all too possible. In part, that's because many of us have no idea how much we actually need. More than half of all Americans, even successful ones, have never tried to calculate how much money they'll need in retirement. And I understand why. When you don't know, you can convince yourself that it will all be okay or work itself out, but that's dangerous. So that takes us to money rule number 73. Hope is not an investment strategy, although I really wish it was. Instead of us crossing our fingers and hoping for the best, we need to make a plan. And the first step in the process is to ask ourselves some important questions, like how long will we live? Well, today we know that the average 65-year-old woman will make it till 85, and the average 65-year-old man will make it to 78. But many of you, because we eat well, we might exercise, we search for our best doctors, we want to get all the way to 95 or 100. So that's one component. The second component is how long are we going to work? Statistically, 2/3 of us will work in retirement, about half because we want to and half because we need to. And 1/4 won't be able to work either because the job won't be there or our health will go. My aunt was actually a school reading specialist for 30 years and is using those skills at the public library. She works on the circulation desk during her retirement because she really wants to splurge on her grandchildren. And the third question that we want to ask ourselves is how much will we spend? Again, it's a super tough question, right? We don't really know. But there's an old rule of thumb that says we will spend about 70 to 80% of our pre-retirement income. For people who thought maybe we were puttering around in the garden or we were hanging out with our grandkids, but for people that want to travel or start a new business or a hobby, we'll probably need more. Jean tweeted this slide timetable a while back with some metrics about how by the time we get to retirement, our goal is to save 10 times income. And these were some of the responses that she got back, which I couldn't stop laughing at when I saw. And in honor of the webinar tonight, I actually made avocado toast for breakfast, but I used an English muffin at home and I didn't go out. But oh, same, Kelly. But I wish it came down to the avocado toast. But It's more than that. So in general, if we follow Jean's timetable, which says that we need that 10 times income by the time we retire, here's a breakdown of how that would look. So if we make $100,000 pre-retirement, this calculation would take us to about 72% of our pre-retirement income, which is in that range. Of course, if we need more, we would have to bump those numbers up. If we have money coming in from a pension or something else, then those numbers could go back down. Remember, it's a combination of things that will get us there, right? So that's what the planning is all about. And it's much more important than just the numbers on the page, actually. It involves outlining our hopes, our fears, our goals, our responsibilities, and then figuring out how are we going to get there by saving as much as possible, investing in a way that feels risk appropriate, and protecting our financial world by building it with insurance and an estate plan. But I want to tell you that it might not be as bad as you think when you put all of that together, the numbers. For years, Jean, along with some other financial folks, may have been telling you that you need to save more. We have studies like the Employee Benefit Retirement Readiness Rating, which says that only 26% of people feel very confident that they will have enough money to take care of basic expenses and healthcare costs in retirement. Well, Jean's taken another look at those numbers, and although she thinks many of you should still be saving more, the picture's not as dire as all that. There's actually a middle ground. So what we know now is that 47% of Americans are partially ready. So if we add them to the 26 that are fully ready, the picture looks less dire. The question is, how do you get from partially ready to really ready? Or if you're one of those who is not ready at all, how do you do it? And that's where money rule number 20 comes into play. Count calories, count dollars like calories. And I bet you more people can tell you the number of calories in a Big Mac, it's 550 for the record, than the balance in their retirement accounts. That's the problem. So you have to know how much you have and how long those savings will last. So if you haven't run your numbers, I highly suggest an online calculator. AARP has a terrific one. Town and Country also has a financial wellness retirement page, so check that out. And if you're not quite ready, we're going to talk about some things that you can do to get ready. So number one is you can keep working. The longer you work, you're continuing to draw a salary. You can put off taking money from your 401k or other retirement accounts, and you can continue to contribute, and it can grow tax deferred. So it's kind of a good thing all around. The second thing we could do is possibly consider delaying Social Security to closer to 70. So every year that you wait from full retirement to age 70, you're basically getting an 8% boost in what Social Security will pay you out. And there's also the cost of living adjustment that Social Security sometimes puts out. And that's a percentage. So if you wait and get that higher number, that cost of living adjustment is off of that higher number. Now, if you're not in good health or you feel that the life expectancy is not there, there are factors where taking early does make sense. So definitely talk to an expert, do your research, and talk to a professional about the best way to take those Social Security benefits. The third thing that we can do is save. And it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Actually, we're terrible savers. It didn't used to be that way. The generation that came through and truly remembers the Depression saved money consistently. The national savings rate spiked in the 1940s, kind of tapered off in the 1950s and 60s. And in the mid 80s, we were saving 10% of whatever we earned. By 2005, though, we were spending more than we made. And today, nearly 40% of adults have less savings or no savings compared to a year ago. Now, granted, this is in part due to increased inflation, the most aggressive interest rate hikes in 4 decades, and stimulus money that's been used up. But more than 1/3 have more credit card than cash reserves, which is the highest on record, and 57% of adults say they could not afford a $1,000 emergency expense. On top of that, savings will and always be no fun. What happens is because we're choosing to save, we're delaying our gratification rather than getting that immediate gratification. And our brain doesn't like that. So in recent years, a relatively new breed of scientists called neuroeconomists have started using MRIs to view the brain in the process of making choices. What they see is that when something comes into view, our pleasure center in our brain fires up. And when we actually get that item, we feel that dopamine rush. But if you delay the availability of the item, even by a day, you have to make the reward considerably bigger in order to arouse the same amount of interest from the brain. Actually, in our finance fix coach that we do, we talk about putting this 24-hour pause in spending to make sure we want it, to make sure we still are going to use it. Like we go through a checklist because that delay seems to trick us. Like we come off that high of purchasing the item. And by the way, things way off in the future, like a house or retirement, they don't jostle the pleasure centers in the brain much at all. Take a look at this.
I'm an undesirable. No, I am. The lady at the bank said I was an unattractive candidate for a loan. Where did all my money go? I know I made some.
At $400 a pop, how many of these do you have? 50?
Come on.
100?
Would that be wrong?
100 times 400. There's your down payment.
Well, that's only $4,000.
No, it's 40,000.
I spent $40,000 on shoes and I have no place to live? I will literally be the old woman who lived in her shoes.
Okay, well, our situations might not be extreme as Carrie's. One way to combat these urges is with mind games. So for me, that involves visualization. And that for me is retirement is a small little house in New England for the summers and a beach place for the winters. Although my husband wants to live with the land in Montana. So clearly we have some things to talk about. But at least I know what it looks like. That makes it a lot easier to say, don't buy those shoes, or whatever your version of the shoes is. Maybe it's concert tickets, maybe it's shopping, whatever that is. But because I'm not choosing the beautiful pumps, I'm not choosing between the beautiful pumps and retirement. I'm choosing between the beautiful pumps and a Cape Cod style house on the Atlantic. So knowing that, I can leave the shoes in the store. Another thing that helps is if we can't see it and we can't touch it, we tend not to spend it. So automating our savings and knowing where our next dollar is going to go really helps. I recently gave a presentation at the Country Music Association, and the VP of HR shared with me that they auto-enroll their employees in the 401k, and they would have to opt out if they didn't want it. And some of the younger employees didn't realize that part of their paycheck was going to this, but they didn't miss it either. And there's one reason why saving in a retirement plan like this works. The money is swiped out of your check before it ever lands in your checking account. So you never see it and you never touch it. And if you don't want to spend it before, if you do want to spend it before 59 and a half, you face nasty penalties and taxes, which can actually amount to 30% of every dollar. And that hurts. So the key is to put these funds in as many hands-off places as possible. And here's a list of kind of how Jean approaches her savings pyramid, starting with the bottom, making sure you have that solid emergency fund first, and then not missing out on those 401k matching dollars, because that is free money from your employer. So having as many of these accounts as possible really does, like I said, tuck it away so we don't touch it. The other thing that's important to keep in mind is just because someone will lend it to it doesn't mean we should borrow it. So I don't know, I tell my kids all the time, just because you have it in an account doesn't mean you have to spend it. But we sometimes feel that way. And we sometimes actually treat different kinds of money differently, right? If it's cash versus credit card versus Venmo, which kind of seems like free money, right? It just stays in your Venmo account and somehow doesn't count. So let's just recap kind of where we're at. We're working longer. We're possibly delaying Social Security. We're saving more. What else can we do? At this point, we want to be wary of taking on more debt. Credit card interest rates have increased steadily over the past year, as well as home equity line of credit. Chances are you've probably seen evidence of that. And federal student loans are back in play. This is the time in our life where we should be thinking about paying it down rather than leveraging it up. And this applies to whether we're talking about, like I mentioned, credit cards, home equity loans, reverse mortgages, cars. And then something else we can do is keep our spending in check. So in our finance fix class, actually, we say you won't know where to go until you know where you've been. So we actually look at past spending as a way of our kicking off our class. And anyone that's interested, reach out to me. I'm happy to fill you in more. But we look at where we've spent our money. We set some goals. We track our progress, which leads to creating savings and some new habits. And if you're interested, you can learn more at financefix.com. So just to recap again, so we're not working longer. We're possibly delaying Social Security. We're saving more. We're avoiding debt. We're spending less. We're doing great. So now what do we do with all that cash, with our newfound riches? Jean always says we need to get it out of our checking account and into our savings account. So that's really important. And we want to diversify. So look, no one knows where the markets are going. That makes being an investor kind of frightening. But one thing we do know for sure is that different segments of the market, stocks and bonds, for example, tend to do well at different times. So owning bonds is a form of insurance against owning stocks and vice versa. And having both tends to mean that although you won't do as well as if you had that winning asset, which again, you cannot predict, by holding both, you don't lose your shirt. So, and then holding these different asset classes, not just stocks and bonds, but cash, real estate, precious metals, as well as subclasses, domestic, international, emerging markets, large and small, that's all called diversification. So when investors talk about not putting all of their eggs in one basket, that's what they mean. And it's more important than ever because as you enter retirement, you also need to think about income, about that question of taking that sum of money that you worked really hard for and making sure that it lasts as long as you do. And in the days of pensions, this was unnecessary, but today is kind of a do-it-yourself environment. You can formulate your own pension by making a strategic distribution plan, make sure to take taxes into account, and always keep an eye out on discretionary spending. You can also do it with an annuity, and I know annuities have a bad name. Jean's actually a fan of using an immediate annuity where you take part of your retirement stash and convert it to a paycheck to make sure that your fixed costs are covered. But to be clear, these are insurance products. So a 65-year-old woman with $1 million could buy a monthly payout of about $5,700 for the rest of her life. But if she dies 5 years later, the insurer pockets the rest of the money. But if she lives to 105, then or longer, the insurer is on the hook for all those years. So an annuity is not a good bet for someone with poor health or a family history of early death. But if you believe you'll live many, many years, it could make sense. There are a lot of people who believe they know how to make all of these decisions, including how to build a portfolio, but their actions say otherwise. In the households in the United States that own stocks, for example, the median family holds only 2 different ones. That's a long way from diversification. Many investors believe they understand the risks that come with owning too much company stock. But one study taken after Enron showed 2/3 of retirement plan participants believe their company stock is safe or safer as a diversified portfolio. And many investors claim that they rebalance their portfolios regularly. But we know from research that 9 times out of 10, they don't do that either. So these days, many retirement accounts offer a solution to that problem. They're called target date retirement funds, which are managed to take a decreasing amount of risk as you age. They can take you not just up to retirement, but through retirement. And when the market tumbles, they can be a big help. So if you're a person like this, having an edited selection of better choices and one solid choice as a default is clearly a better way to get off the right investment footing, as well as to reduce stress. And if you're still feeling like this is all too much, that's okay. We can get some help, right? It's not because we're not smart enough or skilled enough. We're probably both, but we've all been there where we're busy people. We know that we're putting energies into running our business and raising our children and managing households and caring for older parents and serving our community. And there just isn't enough time in our financial, to kind of manage our financial lives. So we can find that help by getting a financial advisor who we feel comfortable. We can get that help by talking to each other. So, and I just want to say that if you're interested in investing and you want to kind of bump up your level of knowledge, no experience is needed. Karen Feinerman from CNBC's Fast Money and Jean hold a bi-weekly investing club. I am the coach of the club, and it's been amazing. We've been doing it for 2 years, and the women in the club absolutely love it. So if you're interested in that, you can check that out at investingfix.com. This is my mom. I learned a lot of things from my mom. I feel lucky that I got a lot of money insights from my mom. Not everyone is as fortunate. I feel that we don't always learn it from our parents, and we don't always talk about it with our kids or our friends. So there's not a lot of conversation. And unfortunately, schools don't really address it in a lot of places. Although my son did just sign up for a financial literacy class second semester, senior year this year. They just added it. So that should be interesting. Although I said, can I teach you everything? But let him learn it from somebody else. But we need to talk about it, right? So there's a lot of things that kind of need to be talked through. So today is my challenge. I'm challenging you. If you don't feel like you have a grip on your financial life, today is the day to start taking control. So take these money rules, talk about them at the dinner table, bring them up with your spouse, your kids, your parents, your friends. And when it comes down to it, I just want you to remember this most important money rule of them all. It's not about having it all. It's about what you value most. And give yourself a break a little more often, and getting your financial priorities in line can really help with that. Money, like gasoline, gold, it's a limited resource. So if we can truly become conscious about the way we walk through our financial lives and what matters to us, our choices will prove to be good ones, and not just for ourselves, for our family, our children, and grandchildren to come. And thank you so much. There was one question that had come in early about how do you save for college and retirement at the same time? And I don't know if you've all had experienced this, but we all often have conflicting priorities in our life, right? We want to do this, but we also want to do that. It comes up a lot with our coaching clients when they want to pay back debt, but they also want to build the emergency fund. And sometimes they need to do both at the same time. And the reasoning behind that, on a side note, is because if we don't build that emergency fund and then we have the emergency, it goes back on the credit card. And then we're in that cycle of debt. And at almost 30% interest rate these days on that credit card debt, it is really hard for people to kind of dig out of. But on the college front, and I have one in college and one going to college next year, I think that communication is really important. And it probably needs to start when they're entering high school and making them aware of what you can afford, right? So college is super, super expensive, and hopefully we save for it, but not everyone has. And even when we've saved for it, it might not be enough. And I'll say that when I was, I do caution you, though, before using your retirement money to pay for college, that you really think hard, because when we pull our money out of a 401k, besides the penalties, we're losing the compound interest on that money by not having it in the account anymore and not growing on top of it. So not only do we have less of kind of a pot, our pot is growing less because we don't have all those funds in it anymore. And we shouldn't be expected to have to pay for everything. Like, you shouldn't have to have the whole pot of money ready for college when they enter. And there's a good rule of thumb in that you should try not to finance or have your student finance more than what their starting salary would be a year or two out of college. So if they're going to go into IT or computer science and they think that they could make $100,000, theoretically, the rationale behind it is that they could finance $100,000 because they could pay that back 10% for 10 years, and that's reasonable. But more than that would be a burden. So if they're starting with a starting salary of $30,000 or $40,000, that would be the limit to finance. So those are just some things to keep in mind when you're making that decision. Kids also can have skin in the game, right? They can comb through the scholarship books. They can start building their grades, because those good grades, they really help, they help with merit aid. So there are things that you can do if you can strategize early. But that big price ticket, I hear you on that one. Kind of having an idea of what our whole situation looks like. And that's where a certified financial planner can really help us make our plan. We don't necessarily have to have them manage our funds. These days, financial planners, I feel like, are way more accessible than they ever have been. And you can sit with someone to craft a plan and not necessarily go further with them. You can get that advice and guidance. Don't forget that in retirement, we may have some other tax implications if we have required minimum distributions, if we have other things that are generating income. There's some tax associated with Social Security. So, but the goal is to be in the lower tax bracket, but you do want to do some good tax planning. And I would think it would be worth sitting with a professional to kind of do that. This was just planting the seed and giving some ideas on how we could look at getting there if we're not there. And then for the specifics, that's where you would work with that planner. So if you check out hermoney.com, we have a lot of articles on finding the right financial advisor, breaking down the different terminology, questions to ask the financial advisor. You're looking for a fee-only financial advisor. We usually say that we like to find a certified financial professional, which goes by the initial CFP. And you want them to be a fiduciary, which means that they're putting your best interests. Taking action is the biggest thing you can do.
Yes.
So not beating yourself up that you started late or you haven't started, just getting started is a great first step.